Hey everyone, welcome to the Postgame Show presented by Ricoh. I'm Marisa Pilla with Fran Duffy and Ike Reese. And a season that started so promising for the Philadelphia Eagles ends in such disappointing fashion, losing 32-9 in the wild card round to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How did we get here?
Yeah, I think that's the question that a lot of people have been asking themselves and will continue to ask themselves as we work our way through this offseason and try to head towards improving on what we could look like in the 2024 season. But you just go back, 2 months ago, Thanksgiving, a big win against the Buffalo Bills at home in overtime. Jalen Hurts scoring the game-winning touchdown, sitting at 10-1. Eagles with the best record in football. There's no one that could have imagined being where we are right now just 2 months later. And that's where a lot of questioning and soul-searching will happen with the organization over the next coming days, over the next coming weeks, as to how do you fix this and what's the best course of doing that. Because when you look at this team, there is plenty of talent here. Now, is there enough talent to get to where we ultimately want to go based on the results? There's not enough talent here. There's also a lot of other questions that need to be answered and asked as to how you improve this team moving forward. But you better believe this is an organization that won't sit back and lay down and just accept not meeting a certain standard. We talk about the standard being the standard all the time. Well, those things still will ring true as you move forward with this organization. And so you saw shots of owner Jeffrey Lurie in his suite watching this game, and that did not look like a happy man to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think, you mentioned just where we were 6 weeks ago with this football team. 10-1, you're coming off that overtime win over the Buffalo Bills, a week removed from the win against the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football on the road. And to see that team be where it is right now, ousted in the first round of the playoffs, going 1-5 down the stretch in the regular season and losing to the NFC South champion Tampa Bay Bucks. Certainly a disappointing end to this season. And everybody that's watching this show and is joining the three of us, that we're kind of like at a loss for words with this team, right? We have been over the last month plus. And in this game, I think you saw a lot of the same things that we've seen over the last month pop up. Issues on third down, issues against the blitz, the missed tackles popped up again. That was not an issue in the first half of the season. That was not an issue, in Kansas City or against Buffalo. But in the last month, in the last 3-4 games especially, the defensive issues multiplied. The issues on offense were magnified. This was a tough watch tonight, and it's been a tough watch over the last month.
It's been getting inexplicably snowballing over the last few weeks. These little things, missed tackles, okay, one here or there, but it just started to, what started as uncharacteristic started to become characteristic for this team, and there was no way for them to stop it. And as you said, a lot of that continued today. The missed tackles, third down. Everyone knew heading into this game, point number one on the scouting board for Tampa Bay was they're going to blitz. The Eagles didn't have any answers for that blitz. What should have they been doing?
Well, I mean, listen, when you have a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, splits the third most in the entire league, you know what to expect coming into this game. And there are times where, they send 5 guys and there are enough guys for you to pick it up. And the quarterback, you got to know where you want to go with the football and get it out your hands quick. And then there are times, often with a Todd Bowles type of defense, much like we saw with Wink Martindale, where they bring one extra guy and you're going to get somebody coming free. And a lot of it is about play designs on the offense. How do you combat that? That's where, the coaches that are in those positions, I'm sure they go over these things week to week, blitz pickups and all of those things. But sometimes, the defense just has the right number dialed up and you don't have the right answer. And it seems like over the last 2 weeks, especially against the Giants and Tampa Bay, is that we've seen an enormous amount of blitzing coming at this Eagles offense, and this is a copycat league. When you don't show that you have the answers for these types of things, then the next team you face, they're going to give you the same type of blitzes.
And that's the thing, is that the numbers in this game, Jalen Hurts, I know coming into halftime, he was 14 of 20 for 165 yards and a touchdown. And you look at it and you say, okay, that's an efficient afternoon, efficient night for Jalen Hurts going into halftime, right? Well, at the end of the day, the Eagles were 0 for 9 on third down. And that's a situation on offense where when you can't stay on the field, when you can't create, continue those drives by converting on third down. And, it's not like they were, 3 for 4 on fourth down. They were 0 for 2 on fourth down. So this team could not create and sustain offense in this game. And obviously 9 points speak to that. A lot of that comes on a 55-yard catch to Devontae Smith, who was outstanding tonight and did everything he could to try and will this team to victory and will this offense into success. But I think when you look at this offense, the big thing right now on the back end of this season, and really for the majority of the season, has been their ability to successfully handle extra pressure from the opposing defense.
Yeah, Devontae Smith was that spark on the offense. And there was a moment in the second quarter where we thought they maybe are getting their feet underneath them a little bit, but they were held scoreless in 3 of the 4 quarters today. And all 9 of their points came in that second quarter, unable to create any of that momentum. They started to spark in the second quarter, in the third and fourth. They outscored Tampa Bay 9-6 in the second quarter, and that's kind of where that spark fizzled out.
Yeah, and even with them playing well in that second quarter, I was still a little surprised that they didn't run the ball as much as I thought they would run the ball tonight. The success they had in that first game against Tampa, that coupled along with some of our deficiencies that we have on the defensive side of the ball, I thought that would be a formula for success for this Eagles team tonight. If you can have some sort of ball control type of offense, keep that Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense on the sideline, help your defense out, keep them fresh, I thought that would at least be a way to keep this game close. And let's not lose sight that this was a game into the third quarter. You were looking at 16-9. This game was. The defense has started to get a little traction. They had gotten, I believe, consecutive sacks on third downs.
3 straight drives.
Yeah, 3 straight drives against the Bucs to get them off the field and give the offense a chance to sort of get back into the game. And we just couldn't get anything offensively going in the second half of this game tonight. Stayed backed up on our side of the field for the majority of the night, and that's where you got to sort of give the Bucs defense a lot of credit. But to me, I thought DeAndre Swift would be a little bit more of the offensive game plan tonight, and I thought that would help our defense out against this Bucs offense that they didn't do a great job in the first half, although they held Tampa Bay to field goals instead of touchdowns, which actually kept you in the game. Tampa Bay scored on 4 straight drives, but it was only 1 touchdown with 3 field goals. And midway through that third quarter, you're still looking at a 1-possession game there. Just needed the offense to get something going. You thought they got a little bit of a spark that led to that touchdown with Dallas Goedert. But after that, we couldn't get much else going. Fran talked about being able to convert on third down to extend drives. Even when we were in third and short yardage situations, we just couldn't get over that hump. It was multiple 3rd and 2 situations that we didn't convert into first downs. And that's something that we were doing earlier in the season.
3 3-and-outs in the first 3 quarters, and one of them was the safety possession, and obviously that was the killer. That was the turning point in this game, was Jalen Hurts taking that safety, and that made it a 2-score game. And then Tampa Bay came out. That's when they scored that long touchdown to Trey Palmer, the rookie, as we see Brandon Graham come off the field, and go into the locker room. To me, Marisa, you talked about Devontae Smith, providing that spark offensively. To me, the sack that BG and Fletcher Cox had in the second quarter, that was a spark for the defense where you saw those guys come off the field and were really fiery and getting after their guys on that sideline, and you saw them bringing that emotion, giving that spark. And then Devontae Smith comes out and he has that long catch and run, the 35-yarder that set up the Eagles' first points. On both sides, those were kind of the linchpins, and I thought that, okay, now that they kind of have something going and they had that momentum, the spark, they couldn't take advantage of that enough, and ultimately we saw what happened. I agree, that turning point was the safety there in the third quarter.
Yeah, you could kind of feel everything start to shift when that started to happen. And also, to your point about running the ball, in week 3 when the Eagles played the Bucs, they had 201 rushing yards, one of the highest of the season. Tonight, 42 total rushing yards, and DeAndre Swift carried the ball for 34 of those. So it just really wasn't an option for them going forward. How much did that have to do with the blitz that they were shown a lot, or how much was just schematic calls?
Well, only Coach Sirianni and Coach Brian Johnson know what dictated what they did on the offensive side of the ball. But I would just say, from my viewpoint, when you get a team that likes to blitz as much as Tampa Bay likes to blitz, they're not sending a lot of run blitzing defenses at you. They're blitzing when they feel like you're in an obvious passing situation, And sometimes it's not predicated on down and distance. It's predicated on personnel. So you come out there in 11 personnel, well, to Tampa Bay, that says you're probably going to try to throw the ball here, so we're going to send extra guys at you. And that's what we saw an awful lot of tonight. I think the way you sort of combat that is you give Tampa Bay a little more to think about by running the ball at them at times. Even when you get to, 3rd and 2, we did this multiple times throughout the season where it's 3rd and 2 and you already know in the back of your mind that if we don't pick up the first down with this run, we're going for it on 4th down anyway. We didn't do a lot of that tonight. What we did was we threw the ball on 3rd and 2 multiple times, and we didn't pick up any of those. So that's where Tampa is saying, based off your personnel, we know it's more likely for you to throw the ball than it is run the ball here. We're going to send extra rushers at you.
So 2 things. First off, DeAndre Swift, 10 carries for 34 yards in this game. 17 of them came on 1 run. So 9 carries for I only took 1 math class in college. 9 carries for 17 or for 17 yards. For 17 yards. So that's under 2 yards a carry for the other 9 carries. That's not going to cut it for this offense. And we talked about the issues when the Eagles were winning games through the chunk of this year. The inconsistencies running the football was a big issue for this team. And we said, it's different things every week. And I would say, too, to the volume of runs in this game, the Eagles ran a bunch of RPOs. I know the long catch and run for Devontae Smith in the first half, that was off an RPO. Some of the plays they were able to get to convert some plays to Dallas Goedert, the touchdown, RPO. So we saw some of those run-pass option plays that the ball ended up going to Jalen Hurts and coming out of his hand in the throw game. But at the end of the day, just not efficient enough with the run game. You had the one explosive run from DeAndre, and then even some negative runs as well. That -6 right before on the safety drive, where Kenny Gainwell goes -6 on the try. He tries to cut back against the grain. That sets up the Eagles behind the sticks, and then 2 plays later, Jalen Hurts is tackled in the end zone, intentional grounding for a safety. So I think when you look at the run game, just not efficient enough here tonight.
Yeah, let's move to the other side of the ball.
Yeah.
The defense didn't have that much better of a showing for the Eagles tonight. And what was interesting, too, was there were moments where Baker Mayfield just looked so confident slinging the ball down the field and almost had no fear of repercussion in terms of going for those explosive plays. A lot of those didn't connect with his receivers, but only by a few inches. And it had a feeling that he wasn't afraid of the Eagles secondary, and he was confident he could take those chances and still get another chance at going at it again. And we know the secondary has been so banged up for the Eagles this season, and it was always kind of the weakest point of the defense. But defensively, where did you see areas where they could have really built themselves back up?
Well, listen, throwing the football against this defense, teams have had success. We watched that throughout the season at times. And quite frankly, in the first half, I thought Baker was comfortable back there. They didn't get much pressure on him. He was able to get rid of the ball. And we've had an issue with being sort of vulnerable in the hash marks in the middle part of the defense, whether it's our nickel coverage or our linebackers. And so that's where they wanted to take advantage of some throws there. But then I thought we did some good things in that 3rd quarter. I thought we did some things to make Baker hold on to the football, making, as they say, burp the baby back there. And then you had guys able to get to him, get hits on him. And that's where that Tampa Bay's offense sort of stifled there in the 3rd quarter. They didn't get much going when we mentioned the 3 consecutive 3rd down sacks that they were able to get. But in that first half, I'm sure part of Avonte Maddox playing a new position, even though he's played safety in the past. It's still been a few years since he's played safety.
3 schemes ago.
Yeah, his eye discipline, his reads, his instinctual play is going to be off because he's used to playing in the slot versus being way back there playing a deep thirds. You think about the play that scored, I think they scored a touchdown. They got a big gain on it where he and Eli Ricks ran into each other. Well, Avonte's coming down and his eyes isn't looking at the entire field so that he knows with that tight split, it's a pretty good chance somebody's coming across the field. He's so locked in on his guy that he's not paying attention to the other side, and he knocks off, I believe, Eli Ricks there, and that allowed the young Tampa Bay receiver to sort of get in the end zone. So I think some of that is just personnel out of position in certain times that they were able to take advantage of. But then I thought in that 3rd quarter, whatever they did coverage-wise, forced Baker to hold on to the football a little longer than he was in the first half, and the D-line was able to get there for 3 sacks. It's been a while since we've had, 3 sacks in a game.
Especially on third down.
Yeah.
I don't know that they've had that this season where they were able to get home to the quarterback 3 times on third down. And so I think when you look at this defense, certainly that was the big positive. The missed tackles was bad. I mean, there's no other way to talk about it. You talk about last week against the Giants, it was bad. The week before against Arizona, it was bad. So the last 3 weeks, the tackling on that side of the football, and that's something that's going to be a whole different discussion by the time you get around to next summer and to next season. But that was a bad way to end this season, no question.
Yeah, that's the one thing for me as a defensive player that it just sticks out like a sore thumb. It just does. You can talk about all the X's and the O's and schemes that you want to, but going up, making a tackle, getting hits on the ball carrier, to me, I've always felt like that's about desire and wanting to get there and wanting to make the play as opposed to waiting on somebody else to make the play. I just thought there were too many instances tonight where there were defenders in place to where it should have been either a stop for no gain or a minimal gain or even in some cases a loss. And the Tampa Bay runners were able to break out of tackles or guys completely whipped on tackles. So to me, schemes, whatever, I look at being able to make tackles, getting off of blocks. To me, that speaks about what type of defense you're going to be. And I just think over the last month, it's just been way too much of missing tackles. Even when you've had defenders in position to make plays, we're not making the plays.
And not one player either.
Exactly.
Multiple position groups. I mean,
Yeah.
it was an issue that plagued this defense over the course of the last 3 or 4 games.
So it's almost like you can read a little more into these missed tackles. There might be something else that's playing a role. And we would talk too, there's a lot of subconscious thoughts that must be going through these players' minds when things haven't been going well. You enter the playoffs in a way, in a form that doesn't really identify with your whole team persona. And it has to be tough to try to break through that in a playoff scenario where win and go home. You should have won the division. You didn't do that. You have to go on the road, try to win a game, and just come up short time in and time out. It just kind of adds up at a certain point.
Sure, and these guys are human. Human nature and athletes at times can be the most fickle when it comes to being confident versus being a little unconfident in yourself. And so when you don't get the results you're looking for out there on the field and things aren't going well, that's when you can start to second guess yourself or be a little unsure of yourself. So, the way they played coming down the stretch, I'm pretty sure that their confidence levels were nowhere near as high as they were when they were 10-1, right? I mean, that's just like I said, it's human nature to have that. But I thought they came out with a want to win this game tonight. I thought I saw that earlier in the game. I really do. Things didn't go well for the defense. They gave up 4 scores on 4 straight drives. The offense was trying to get something going. They didn't necessarily have it going in that first half, but I didn't see anybody giving up. I thought they still fought to keep themselves in this game in that third quarter. It wasn't until they got that safety and they went down by 2 scores where you may start to see guys' shoulders slump a little bit. And it's like, oh man, here we go. That can happen when you're not playing your best this time of the year, and it's not a one-off, meaning you just had one bad game or what have you. When it's sort of been bad habits, it's been repetitive, and you've been trying to fight your way out of this thing for the last month and a half, it's easy to slip back into that when things aren't going well in the game. Again, I want to give them credit. I thought they fought their butts off 2.5 quarters, almost 3 quarters there, and then it got to that safety, and then Tampa scored, and then that's when you could almost feel like the air went out of the building there. So, you never want to say a team didn't put their best foot forward, right? Especially in a playoff game. So I want to give them credit or the benefit of the doubt to say they at least were doing that. But I also understand when it starts to snowball on you, human nature, even when you may not consciously know that it's not your best, subconsciously, that's what happens.
I didn't play like you did, right? I've been around this team now. This is my 13th season, just finished. And one thing I could say, that has changed for me since I got here to right now is the impact that confidence or the lack of confidence can have. And that is a true force multiplier for a team where, and in that it can take whatever your talent level is. If you have a lot of confidence and if you're executing at a high level and you're doing it repetitively week after week, that is going to climb and climb and climb. And the other side of that is that we see the downside of it. And I think that that's something that certainly may have happened here for this team and especially for this defense in the last month. But at the end of the day, to me, it comes down to execution. And this is a defense that just could not get off the field on third down for the majority of this this season, but certainly on the back end. Now today, I think they were 5 of 13 on third down, Tampa Bay. So defense did a good job on third down here in this one. But I think at the end of the day, just a lot that will need to be corrected here this offseason for sure.
I also want everyone at home to know that Ask Ike, presented by Pond Hockey, is still open. I know everyone probably has a lot of questions. Please send them Ike's way. That's why he's here, to answer all of your questions, either from today's game or the season as a whole. But to go a little bit big picture, it's really fair to say that this team underperformed to the expectations that were surrounding them as they entered this season. But looking back on the season as a whole, what are some moments or games where you saw them as close to their potential as they could have been?
Well, one of the games that sticks out to me is, the Miami game.
No doubt. First one.
I thought the Miami game was a game where you saw both sides of the football sort of contribute. The offense was clicking in the passing game and the running game as well. And I thought from a defensive standpoint, would they give up 7 points in that game, I believe? Because I know they scored defensively on a touchdown, I believe. So, defensively going up against that Dolphins offense, to that point, it was the most impressive defensive performance that we have seen around here in a couple years when you think about the Miami firepower that they had coming into that game. So I think about that game, the Buffalo game. To me, that was the game of the year for the Eagles. I just thought that game sort of just embodied, to that point, everything this team sort of has showed us. Because, prior to that, they had some quote-unquote not necessarily pretty wins. They ain't just won by any means necessary. And we say getting the W is all that matters. Well, that was one of those games where it didn't look good early in the game. I think they were down by double digits, had to come back fighting that game, got in the overtime, and won it in thrilling fashion with Jalen Hurts running it in for a touchdown. Like, to me, that was their best game of the season for me.
I don't want to hear those two words next year. Ugly win. Like, I don't want to hear it. I think after everything since Thanksgiving on, I hope that term can be thrown out of the Eagles dictionary.
A win is a win.
A win is a win in the NFL. But to me, to answer your question, Marissa, I think that at the end of the day, the Miami game is the first one that comes to mind. But even thinking, watching all the games this week, Miami, Eagles beat. Buffalo, watch them today. Eagles beat them. Kansas City, Eagles beat them. LA Rams, Eagles beat them. Dallas Cowboys, Eagles beat a bunch of playoff teams, a couple that went to the divisional round. This is a team that belonged with that group. Now, the team that we saw tonight, for the majority of the night, and the team that we saw over the last month, like that was not the team that we saw beat those teams. I mean, honestly, that's not the way that they played over the month of December and into January. And that's the opposite of what we were saying in September and October after those games was, hey, you know what? Like, yeah, there are things that need to be cleaned up, but this was a big win. You want to build. You want to keep climbing, so you're playing your best football when you reach this point in the season. When the temperature drops to below 30 and you're outside and you have home field advantage, that's when you want to be playing your best football. The Eagles were the opposite of that. They were playing their worst football down the stretch, and it came back to bite them.
It was just so frustrating to watch, too, because we saw the potential early in the season, and we saw them be able to win games in a multitude of ways, which only makes you feel a little more confident. And we said this earlier in the season that there's going to be a point where they look back at this moment and be like, oh, we've won in this scenario. We've been down by this. We had to do this or that, and find that way to win again. And it seems like they weren't able to kind of reach into that tool chest, so to speak, and use those going forward.
Now, here's another thing that I hope they take away from the season, because the NFL has a way of humbling you any given Sunday, Monday, Thursday, Saturday, whenever the games are played. The NFL has a way of humbling you as a team. And to a man, I wouldn't be surprised if these players look at themselves this offseason when they get some alone time and they're trying to reflect back on how this went wrong and where it went wrong at and when did it go wrong. Sometimes things can seemingly be a lot easier than most people expect. And what I mean by that is over the course of a season and 11 games, they won a lot of football games, man. From the 2022 season into this season, they won a lot of football games up in that 10-1 record. And sometimes you think the winning is going to come easy, right? And so it's small things. It's small things that you may overlook, that you don't pay attention to. Minor details. When coaches talk about detailing your work, not missing out or overlooking some of the small things, the corrections that are there. When you're winning and you have those type of issues in a game, it's harder for a coach to get to you as a player as to how to correct some of these things. So I say all this to say is that when I look at how the season ended versus where they were at 10-1, it's not because this team wasn't a good football team. This wasn't a mirage. It wasn't smoke and mirrors. But only they truly know where this thing went wrong. And you can lose a game in this league. You may lose 2 games. But it doesn't have to turn into 3, 4 out of 5, 5 out of 6.
Yep.
So it's somewhere in there where they were trying to get this thing turned around, and they weren't able to get it turned around. And that's what's going to have to be fixed this offseason, because a lot of these players will be back. When you look, especially on the offensive side of the ball, it's a very good group of talent, a young core that you can still win with, that I still believe in. Getting things fixed on that side of the football where everybody's on the same page. When you listen to some of the messaging coming out of the locker room, you can pick up on certain things. And when players are talking about connectivity and believing in the coaches and things of that nature, there was obviously something there that didn't allow them to be able to continue to do that. So those are things that when you get back to the drawing boards in the offseason, collect yourself, you sort of recommit to those things, and you can get those things fixed. I've been part of disappointing endings to seasons.
I was just going to ask you that.
I've been a part of that. Yeah, so I've been a part of that, and it takes a little bit of time to move past it. But I think if there's the trust and the faith in each other, and we all are still pushing for the same goal, that one common goal, then everybody's going to be willing to make those sacrifices this offseason so that when you come back the next year, you're better than you were this year, and you don't allow whatever happened after you were 10-1, 10-2 to happen again. Because a lot of these younger players, Devontae, Jalen, these guys are going to be here. They're going to be here, so this can be a learning experience for them that to know that if they get in these tough spots, well, these are the things that we need to do so that we don't allow this thing to continue to happen.
Well, and you mentioned you've been a part of some disappointing teams, and not to rehash everything, but I mean, you were on teams where losing records and coaching staffs fired. You were on divisional round losses teams, 3 NFC title game losses, a Super Bowl loss. When you have those kind of, you talked about every player is going to kind of have that conversation. Is that something that you had just with yourself, or was it small groups? Was it the whole unit? How did those situations get handled?
It usually starts with yourself first, right? And then the small groups form, right? The small groups form, and then it gets, as you get closer to off-season programs starting, you start coming back around the building. What you first realize is guys are here earlier, right? So they're here earlier in the off-season, so everybody's getting a little more committed to the off-season program, as opposed to everybody going off and doing their own thing and only showing up for mandatory things. Started having guys around a little bit more, making sure that you're truly invested and committed to the team, right? It's one thing to be an Eagle, put on the uniform or what have you. It's another thing to be truly invested, meaning that you're invested in your teammates, you're invested in your coaches, you're invested in this organization and everything it embodies, and you're around here. You're a part of what makes this thing click. And you're not going to get a 100% attendance from that, but your main guys have to be a part of that and be the driving force behind that.
Yeah, you have to use that disappointment to actually fuel you
Yes.
going forward. And I think what was interesting about this year is they entered this season with a certain set of expectations because of that Super Bowl appearance, and everything was kind of viewed through that perspective. Everything was held to that standard. Given how this season turned out, how does this season shape the expectations going forward?
I think the expectations stay the same, right? I mean, winning a championship is what the standard is around here. So I think that remains the same. And the difference is that you're not coming off of losing in the Super Bowl. Losing in that Super Bowl last year and really exceeding expectations. For some, that was an achievement. It just was because the expectation and the bar was low for some of those guys. And then there were some who knows what it likes to win a championship. They know how disappointing that was in losing that. Having a season end the way this season ended, there's no one that's going to be happy about this. And so it's a lot easier to get everybody recommitted, refocused, get that drive and that hunger there that's needed, and everybody will be on the same page coming back here next year.
You know, that's why, like, the saying when the Eagles won that Super Bowl in 17, like, the hungry dogs run faster, like, all of that stuff that originates from that kind of a mindset. And there's a reason why people talk about, you know, how difficult it can be coming off of losing a Super Bowl and what it means to get back to that mountaintop and how hard it is to go after. Because, and the Eagles saw that this year, not only are you playing a top flight schedule, but you were getting every other team's best shot each and every week. You were the game that everybody circles. And we saw the gauntlet the Eagles had to run this year, and they made it two-thirds of the way through that gauntlet, basically unscathed. And then on the back end of it was when they lost steam, and then everything kind of snowballed from that point on. So, you know, one of the things I'm sure will be talked about over the course of this offseason.
Yeah, it's just, like we said, a little bit of lost for words at this point, because we think about how we felt early on in this season and how things started to roll. As you said, the gauntlet, like, we looked at that stretch and thought, okay, if they can come out of here winning 3 of these games, 4 of these games, we'll be in good shape. And they started off so much better than we even expected, but for it to fall off the way it did, it was just, there's no answers right now. And also, to run it back is really hard to get back to back-to-back Super Bowls. Plus the fact that they had 2 new coordinators on the field. Things were changing on the field for this Eagles team, and it's not so easy just to repeat success the exact same way.
Yeah, and that's why that game back in February, you know, as we move further away from it, it becomes more and more painful as you think about the opportunity that was missed. And there are no guarantees that you're going to get that opportunity to be back in that game and have a chance to right that wrong. And so, you know, the weight of trying to do that and knowing that that's all that really matters to everyone. Right? You're 3 points away from winning a championship last year. You're bringing the majority of your players back. You know, your quarterback is young. You feel like his future is bright. So you feel like you're going to be able to take on all naysayers and all comers. But the one thing that you can't account for is injuries. You never know when that type of stuff is going to happen. We talked about losing coordinators. So the team I guess in its image is coming back, but it's not really the same team that's coming back from 2022. And more importantly, your opponents and obstacles aren't the same this time around. And the weight of that expectation, I think this team, and it's not as an excuse, I think it's just part of their story this year. The weight of those expectations, I think they carried them all year long. They really did. When we talked about early in the season, when they were winning games, and they weren't winning them necessarily in the fashion that makes everybody happy, whether, you know, they weren't winning because of throwing the football or they weren't scoring enough points or they weren't blowing teams out. You know, as players, you hear that stuff and you almost feel like, well, what can you do to satisfy everybody? You know, how does the win have to look in order for everybody to be happy about it? And again, it's not an excuse. I think it's just part of the story of this year's football team, that the carrying the weight of those expectations, I think, at times was too much for them to bear, and they fought their way through a lot of it, 10-1, and they were having fun, and then when things weren't going well for them late, that weight became even heavier to have to try to shoulder, and they just could never get back to where they were earlier in the season. When they had adversity, they had the ability to fight through that stuff. We talked about how resilient they were early in the season. Well, injuries, repetitive losses, even more importantly, not being able to get out of the funk or the rut that they were in when you talk about negative plays or poorly timed miscues in the game. Like, as players, you start scratching your head like, man, nothing we do is working right now. It seems like something is going wrong every time we try to do anything. And I just think eventually that became a little bit too much for them.
And that's the thing, is that, you know, I think when you look at, you know, this team, if 6 months ago, I think most, and this is all external expectations, right? But most fans and media would say, all right, like, this team went 11-5 out of the year after the Super Bowl. you would probably accept that and say, okay, like let's go to the playoffs and see what can happen when you make the tournament. But it was the how, it was the why, it was the timing of those 5 losses and what happened down the stretch that ultimately resulted in the outcome and the ultimate feelings for this team going into the playoffs.
It certainly made a huge difference. We're actually hearing from Lane Johnson right now in the locker room, his thoughts on offensive third downs and what the offseason means.
A lot of those plays happen, third downs where defense made a stop and we needed to get these plays done so we could change the trajectory of the game, and it didn't happen. So, yeah, it's frustrating. I mean, we have plenty of time off season to reflect, analyze every player. I mean, every player is what it is. You're going to get analyzed for how you produce, what kind of teammates you are, all that. So it's all getting evaluated. So it's frustrating.
So it is what it is for Lane Johnson and the Eagles going forward. And right now that means the season is over. They pack their bags. They're done in the wild card round. And like you said, I think a lot of people, if you told them at the beginning of the year, hey, the Eagles are going to finish 11-5, they would have taken that. But it's the fashion and the form in which that happened.
Yeah, and then obviously the way that they go out in the playoffs was not something that I think fans would have embraced and that the media would have said, okay, like that's acceptable at this point. But look, that's the way that this season went. And like all of you watching at home, we're kind of in the same boat as all of you. We're just, okay, what happens now? This certainly stings. But again, a lot of the issues that we saw tonight is what we've been talking about for the last month.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things that, we spent so many weeks saying, or even the players saying, we got to get this stuff cleaned up. We got to get this stuff cleaned up. We can't continue to play this way and still expect to win. Well, I mean, they were right. And
Right.
that's pretty much how things played itself out over the last month and a half of the season. The only thing that didn't happen tonight was, I don't think we turned the ball over at all tonight. So it wasn't.
No, well, unless you got the safety, but I wouldn't count
Right.
it. Yep.
But other than that, yeah. So it's one of those situations where you feel like you figured out what the issue is, but it's not just one thing, right? It's multiple things, and it's coming from multiple facets of the team, from different players, and it comes up in the most inopportune times. And when you're on the road and you give a team like Tampa Bay any type of confidence, any type of life, they're feeding off that momentum. They're feeding off of that confidence. We just talked earlier, they only scored 9 points last week in their final game against Carolina. 3 field goals.
Yep.
Yeah, three field goals. And so coming into this game, they felt like, okay, this is an area we can try to get healthy in and get our offense going. And, it panned out well for them. And from an Eagles standpoint, you're saying to yourself, we're just basically holding on right now. We're trying to hold on until we can get something going that we can sort of ride the wave or the momentum. And they just couldn't get enough of it going tonight. Even when they got it in short spurts, it fizzled out somehow because we couldn't finish with a touchdown, or we couldn't convert on 4th down or something of that nature. And even when our defense played well for that stretch, we couldn't get anything going from the offensive side of the football to sort of build off of that momentum.
It never clicked.
Yeah.
It just never clicked. And there was a lot of talk about flipping the switch and finding it all. They just weren't able to do it. And some teams are and some teams aren't. And it's not to say they didn't have the ability to flip the switch. They just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I know what you said about there was all these little problems going on, all these little things that added up. Was there a hierarchy in terms of what should have been addressed first? If they addressed one thing first, would it have created a domino effect going forward?
Well, I mean, you look at this team, and Fran, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's different issues, and it's on both sides of the football. So, right, the problems on the offensive side of the ball, whatever they may have been, whether it was from schemes, whether it's from play calling, whatever it may have been, that's totally different than the issues they had on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
Right? So defense dealing with a lot more injuries, guys playing out of position. You got a new coordinator over there trying to figure out how do you put guys in the best position so that you can, A, help the defense as a whole unit, but also get the most out of those individual players, particularly your star players. And so they're trying to fix things on the run. Whereas with the offensive side of the ball, I wonder how much, coming into the game, Jalen with his hand, he didn't look comfortable early in the game, but as the game started to move on, he started to seem like he didn't think about his hand as much. But I wonder how much coming into the game did that play with his mental.
Yeah, he dealt with the knee earlier this year. He was sick the game against Seattle. And to answer your question, Marissa, I think, too, the other thing I think about with this team, especially compared to last year's team, is that when you look at the sport of football, and it's one of my favorite things about it, it's one of the things I love about it, but also it's the thing that makes our jobs hardest in explaining things when things go wrong, is that it is the ultimate team game, and complementary football is absolutely a thing. And when you look back at 2022, and one of the things that made the Eagles so great was, offensively, they jumped out on teams. They were the best first half team in football. They scored, 25 points every first half. And then when you get into halftime, you come out of the locker room, and offensively, you're going to run the ball down the other team's throat, and you're going to pin your ears back, and you're going to rush the passer, and you set a team record in sacks, and you were the best rushing team by efficiency in team history, right? So I think when you look at that team, and then you juxtapose that with what happened this year, and you had a lot of slow starts on offense, which then meant the defense was playing uphill for most of the second half, and you didn't have as many of those pass rush opportunities, and things happened where guys got a little bit older or fell off a little bit, and now all of a sudden all these little things here and there, and it's not even drastic changes, right? You had changes schematically, you had changes with both coordinators, position coaches on both sides, you had big changes there, but I think ultimately in just the overall feel of the team, why things felt a little bit different is that you had that explosive start in so many of those games last year, and it changes the whole dynamic. And when you don't, so that's why, we could say like the issues on offense versus the issues on defense, they were very different. You're having some different conversations on both sides of the football, but those issues affected one another, and that's again one of the things that I love about this game. It's one of that's why you can't. It's not just kind of black and white, like very simple thinking. You often have to think about the game in a lot of different ways and a lot of different ways to approach it. But ultimately, it's the ultimate team sport, and that was one of the big things with this team is that you had too many issues that impacted each other on both sides of the football.
Yeah, it was a very complicated knot to
Yes.
untie and untangle this season. Dallas Goedert just spoke to the media in the locker room, and he wanted to explain that situation he had with Jalen Hurts on the sideline.
Why did it boil over like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm trying to think of this game. Someone mentioned that to me earlier. I don't think me and Jalen had any problems all game. I think I saw the clip. It was hard to tell what part of the game it was, but I think it was on the third down, and I missed a signal, and I could have messed up a big play to Smitty there early in the game. I think that's when it was, and it was my fault. I missed the sign, and it could have been a big play to Smitty. So I was just a little frustrated with myself, not Jalen at all. Me and him got a great relationship. I don't think we've ever had an argument. So it was nothing that it's an emotional game. It was we didn't get it on third down, so everybody's a little upset. But it was we got no beef at all.
It seemed like a lot of
It's good to get his perspective there because from an outsider looking in, it looked like a completely different situation. But with Dallas's context there in that situation, we have a little more information, I guess.
Yeah, and hearing it straight from the horse's mouth as to what was going on from his perspective, it's great to hear. And I got no problem with that. Throughout the course of a game, and I know this wasn't some big blow up or anything of that nature. I just know emotions run high, and sometimes it can be you holding yourself accountable as a player as to what you should have been doing on a certain play that would have impacted what somebody else could have did on that play. And that's what it sounds like. Dallas was sort of mad at himself for not being in the right place or what have you. And that may have impacted what Smitty could have done on that play based on the routes.
Did that ever happen to you as a player? Obviously, you had those conversations, but where it was caught on camera and then you were asked about it afterwards?
No, never on camera.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
Never caught on camera, yeah. I wasn't important enough for the camera to be following me. And none of my disagreements involved the coach or the quarterback. So, yeah, if me and one of my, linebacker mates or somebody, had a little heated spat over there, yeah, they probably weren't necessarily checking for me on the sideline. So, yeah. Yeah, and thankfully, not. Yeah, thankfully, none of those things were caught on the sideline.
That's now just between you and your teammates.
Yeah,
forever.
listen, it happens. I think there's more cameras that pay attention to that stuff nowadays, because like players, yeah, believe me, I played with some colorful guys.
Right. That's a nice way to put it.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. Let's actually head back to the podium, check in with head coach Nick Sirianni.
Hey, Nick, 4th and 2 at your own 44. You punted there.
Beginning of the game?
Yeah. Well, what you're thinking there.
Yeah, I'm not going to give him a short field. It was actually 4th and 3 on the stat sheet, and so I'm not going to give him a short field there in that scenario on the first drive. I always think about that on the first drive. Not going to get into all my decision making on 4th down as far as what I think and when I think it. But that's one I'm right there. I'm not considering going for at that particular time. We didn't get it. We punted. I didn't want to give them a short field after just one possession that they've had. So that's a little bit of the reasoning behind it.
At the beginning of the game, halftime, I think Swift had about 4 carries. What was the flow of the offense in the first half?
Yeah, we were just a little out of sync. Obviously, we had the big play to Devontae. Besides that, we were just a little bit out of flow. That's always going to start with me. Wasn't good enough. Obviously, we're not putting them in good enough positions, and so sometimes when you're in 2nd and long, and 3rd and long, you're not continuing drives. It's easy to look at the stat sheet and say they didn't run it enough, but there's things that aren't being accounted for. You're in 2nd and long, you're in 3rd and long. There's nothing to say that you can't run it there, but it's going to be harder to pick up a first down in those scenarios. So whenever you're out of flow like that and not in sync like we were, it's going to be hard to get your carries when you're behind the sticks. And we had a 2-minute drive there as well. So, hey, listen, we need to be able to run it more. Obviously, we weren't able to today to get into a flow, and that's on me.
Those 3rd and shorts though,
in the season.
Oh, yeah, obviously we were in a big slide, and anytime that's the case, I always look at myself first, and I didn't do a good enough job, and obviously we lost 5 of the last 6 and lost today, and it's almost like you couldn't get out of the rut we couldn't get out the rut we're in, and that's all of us. We'll all have to look ourselves in the mirror and accept that, and just find answers, find solutions. But obviously, when you start 10-1, and then you get into what happened for us. Obviously, that the expectations were high. Expectations were even higher when we started off 10-1, and we fell into a skid. So I'll look at everything. I'll look at obviously the play calling. I'll look at the the scheme. I'll look at practices. I'll look at everything that we're doing, because I think that the past 2 years did some things. We got hot a little bit at the end, and then this year wasn't that case. So anytime that's the case, you're going to look for answers in those scenarios, because it's not always the answer isn't always like, okay, we finished hot last year, lost our last game. Do the same thing. You got to be able to adjust. We did some adjusting to things, but we'll look at everything.
You're looking at everything. Does that include potentially changing coordinator, especially on the defensive side?
Yeah, I mean that's a little premature to talk through that. Everybody in that locker room's hurting right now. Coaches, players, staff, everybody in that locker room's hurting, and my job right now is to be there for them, be there for the guys. We'll get into all that. I'm not there yet. But we're hurting right now. It's tough to go out, the way we did this. Hats off to the Bucs. They had a good game plan. They did a good job. But my mind right now is not there. I got a lot of time to think about that. My mind right now is on the locker room, the guys, the coaches, all those things.
Nick, how do you think you guys did against the Blitz?
I'm sorry, but are you concerned at all about your job?
Like I just said like I just said over here, I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about the guys. Again, there's a lot of guys in that locker room, all the guys in that locker room, every single one of them that put their heart and soul into this. I'm not worried about me. I'm not worried. I'm as the head coach, I'm just trying to be there for our guys and our staff right now. Through a tough time. Obviously we didn't finish anywhere near we wanted to finish, and so again, my heart feels for these guys. We're all taking it hard, and that's where my mind is right now. obviously it was almost a similar play, the safety that we got on them with momentum. And so, anytime a safety like that happens, it's a big momentum change, right? They were up 16-9. I thought our defense was doing a good job, at the beginning of the end of the first half, beginning of the second half. It kind of swung the momentum, there. They made a good play, and we didn't.
You should have thrown the ball.
Not necessarily. I'll have to look at the tape of exactly what happened on that. He's trying to make a play. He does so many good things of making plays, and when he extends plays when something's not there, and you can't get really excited and when he makes changing plays, and then crush him when something like that happens. And so he's made a lot more plays than he hasn't there in that particular case. We got to put him in a better position to make a play, to start things off. And then, hey, like I said, he's made a ton of plays that way. He's tried to make a play in that situation. It didn't work this time.
How do you think Jalen and the offense handled the blitz?
An issue throughout the game.
I'll get you
about that. Through the weeks, and you mentioned early in the season, you guys were near the top of the league. When that sort of turns in a drastic direction, how do you look at that as a coach?
Sure. Again, yeah, you just got to look at how you're going about your business. Tackling is a tricky thing. Not a lot of teams are going to tackle live, right? I don't think any teams are going to tackle live, to be quite honest with you, especially late in the season. And so you got to look at how you're drilling it. You got to look how you're the different technology that they have to help you drill it, because obviously, throughout the body of work of the season, it was good, but it wasn't as good in the last couple of weeks. I think that you can kind of look at everything. If you look at the body of work and a lot of different things this season, the numbers may say one thing, but it wasn't good enough in the past month of the season, right? And so, again, that's going to go back to how we practice, all those different things. I know we had a lot of guys healthy, and we only had 2 starters not here for this game. So part of you wants to say to yourself, well, all hands were on deck for the most part. Obviously, N'Kobe and Sydney, AJ would have been able to be back, I'm assuming. But 2 guys out that were season-ending injuries. You want all hands on deck, but you also got to make sure that you're doing the right things with practice. So we'll look at all that. Again, I'm not there yet with that.
Jalen and the offense handled the blitz tonight.
Hey, we scored 9 points. So how do I think the better way to say that is, how do you think the coaching staff and the players handled the blitz tonight? Because it's not just on one person. We didn't do a good enough job. Starts with me, being able to put them in the right positions to help them make plays. Tried some different things. Hats off to them. They had a good game plan. We didn't coach or play well enough tonight.
Kelsey was emotional coming off the field. Your thoughts on him, particularly if this was the end?
Yeah, I love him. I don't. Obviously, we're not there at that position yet, or to talk about that, or but he's special, and I love him. He's one of the most special guys I've been around. So, obviously, he's always got a place and here, and always want him to play. We'll see what happens as time progresses here.
Given the way the last second half of the season went, I guess what gives you the confidence that you can fix some of the problems that persisted?
Yeah, we believe in ourselves. I'm not sitting in this room, for any reason, and it's the same thing with these guys. I'm really not. I'm not built that way. What gives me the confidence to think that we can fix it? Because we believe in ourselves, and we're in these seats at the at the top of our profession because we worked our ass off to get here. And I can promise you this, that nobody in that locker room thinks that way even a little bit. I don't know in what profession anyone does think that way, and doubts themselves, but sure as hell ain't us.
What do your next few days look like in terms of meeting with Jeffrey? And I know you said that your focus is on the players right now, and you'll get to have.
Yeah, I'm not. Again, like I said, I'm not there yet. I don't know exactly quite yet. Wasn't expecting it to end tonight. It did, and now I'll put together a schedule here on the plane ride home and then tomorrow.
Was there any
specific the Bucs did on offense that really kind of let them move the ball at will on you guys?
Yeah, they ran it well. I thought Baker did some good things, with some pressure things. That he made that really good play against Blitz Zero. Down the middle was that to Godwin, I think. They got some really good players, and I thought they ran the football well, and hats off to them.
Last one.
You mentioned the belief.
Go ahead. I got a guy.
Nick, when you talked about not being able to get out of the rut late in the season, do you look back at some of the decisions and wonder why they didn't work?
Yeah, again, like I said, anytime, anytime we make a decision that doesn't work, I'm going to drag myself through the mud and attempts to get better from it. We don't brush things by. We just try to look for solutions, and obviously our solutions weren't good enough near the end. But we'll go back to the drawing board as we continue on.
All right.
All right.
Back to the drawing board for Nick Sirianni and the Philadelphia Eagles, who are out in the wild card round. And he said a lot about how they just weren't able to adjust and not executing consistently, especially down the stretch of this season. So what did you take away from what Coach had to say?
Well, I mean, he certainly has a realistic perspective on what happened tonight. You didn't hear a lot of, coaches speak from the standpoint of talking about how close they were and if it's just a little play here or play there, where you're almost trying to shine this thing up. I thought he was honest and candid as he could be, but still showing confidence in his team, in his players, and the ability to get things fixed moving forward. Now, the only difference is we're talking about moving forward to next season, right? This isn't moving forward to the Cowboys next week or another game the next week. This is an entire offseason that's going to come with a lot of changes. And getting through this final game and discussing it is never easy for these head coaches because they know there's a finality there, right? They know that the season is over with. So on one hand, you certainly want to appreciate what your players and your coaches have done for you all year, putting it on the line for you. But at the same time, you come up short and the team didn't meet expectations. So you're also wanting to recognize that and understanding what the standard is. And for him, he's thinking about, even though he didn't dive into it a whole lot, he really tried to avoid talking about it. But in his mind, I'm sure at some point, he's thinking about how to make sure we're not in this position again, meaning that you don't fall short of expectations, right? Especially to this degree and the way that the season ended. It's hard for him to really digest all of that right now and sort of put it into words when he's thinking about just this game. But tonight, to me, wasn't about just this game. Yep. Tonight was really a culmination of what we've been watching for the last month and a half. And that's how fans are going to view tonight. It's obviously a loss, and people are frustrated at that, but they don't look at it as this individual game. They're going to look at it in the whole body of work that's come to fruition over the last 2 months of the season.
And that's the thing is that it's one of the beautiful things about competitive sports, and this isn't just football, it's all competitive sports, is that pretty much every year is going to end in some version of disappointment, as we talked about a little bit earlier, right? And every single one of those seasons is going to look a little bit different. And this year compared to last year, the things that, as he put it, that he's going to kind of put himself through the mud on, he's thinking about things that are a lot different after an 11-7 season where you lose in the wild card round versus the season that they had a year ago where you lose in the Super Bowl and you're a possession away from potentially hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. And I think ultimately there's going to be a time for those discussions. There's going to be a time to answer those questions. And I think tonight he really kind of wanted to stay in the here and now in terms of this game and the finality. I think that's a great word for the finality of this season. And tomorrow or whenever it is that he's going to speak, I think that's when he'll start to get into some of those bigger topics.
You almost have to let the reality sink in of that it's over, that there is no next week, there is no next time we go out. When they do, it's going to be months from now. So it's speaking of answering questions, we have an Ask Ike question coming in from one of our fans. Ike, they want to know what was the biggest difference between Week 3 Eagles versus Tampa Bay and tonight?
The biggest difference?
Yes.
Several things. I think this is the better Tampa Bay Bucs team, at this point in the season than what you saw earlier in the season. Earlier in the season, Baker Mayfield is only 3 weeks in. still getting his feet wet with understanding his skill position guys, getting on the same page with those guys. And so they've grown as a football team, winning 5 out of their last 6 games. And Baker is a much better quarterback right now than he was earlier in the season. And conversely, our offense is a couple things. A, we don't have A.J. Brown out there. So that makes it a lot harder for an offense to sort of operate when he requires so much attention. It allows for those other guys to sort of get going. So without having A.J. out there, you can devote more attention to certain guys. And Todd Bowles, it seems like tonight, they blitz more tonight than they did in that first game. And, to me, also the obvious part of it is they ran the ball so much more in the first game. They ran the ball so much more in the first game. Now, I don't want to make it seem as if they didn't throw the ball at all, because I thought Jalen played a nice, solid game in that game, even with the 2 interceptions that he had. One of them was due to miscommunication between he and DeAndre Swift as to where to be on that play, and the other one was just a great play from the safety. I think I remember coming over and making a great play in the end zone on an interception. But I thought Jalen threw the ball well that night. A.J. Brown had his first big game of the season in that game that night. But more importantly, when they had to run the ball late in the game, they were able to salt away, 9 minutes, 8 minutes in that fourth quarter with Tampa Bay. Couldn't get the ball back and get back into the game. Tonight, Tampa got up early in the game, right? And they got up by 2 scores. And then once they got up by 2 scores, now it's harder for the team to stay committed to the run, even if that's what they want to do. You almost feel like you need to get points as fast as you can. Yeah, and that's how it is. And so I think that, and our defense, I think, was better in week 3 of the season.
They held 174 yards of total offense.
Yeah, our defense was much better earlier in the season than what you see right now.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the running portion of it. Back in week 3, the Eagles ran for 12 first downs in that game. 200 yards rushing, but they gained 12 first downs on the ground. Tonight, it was just 3. Conversely, the Bucs back in week 3, they ran for first downs twice in that game, 9 tonight. So you talk about like the flip-flop of both the offense and the defense. And again, complementary football. It's a theme we talked about a little bit earlier. In this game, the Eagles did not win the line of scrimmage to the level that they did back in week 3. And that was a resounding theme. Going back through my notes after that game, we talked about it this week on Eagles Game Plan. The Eagles dominated the line of scrimmage back in that game. Monday night, September, week 3. Down in Tampa, on both sides, they had no answers, Tampa Bay, for the line of scrimmage, and the Eagles dominated. In this one, that was not the case. We saw issues on the offensive line, both run game and pass game, and then defensively, yes, the sacks popped up, certainly on third down, but still not to the level that we have come to expect from this team over the last few years.
Right, we saw a lot of there was a lot of talk about the defensive line early in the season about how talented they were, how much they could get after passers, and just really disrupt opposing offenses. And that just seemed to wane, do you think? And we saw like a lot of young guys have really great starts to the season. How much do you think maybe just getting adjusted to the NFL played a role in that?
I think that played somewhat of a role. And I think the more film or footage a team has on a player, they get a better idea of what he likes to do. More importantly, they get a better idea of things that he struggles with. And so that's what you try to do with a younger player. So when you're talking about Davis and Carter in that middle portion of the defense, also playing more games than they're probably accustomed to, more snaps than they're accustomed to. And so they weren't as effective late in the season as they were early in the season. I thought Milton Williams showed some flashes here and there. And part of what you see with the defensive line as far as why they couldn't get to the quarterback, if you're not, always talk about how you play complementary defense and the secondary is sort of married to the pass rush and it sort of works hand in hand. And so if you don't get up and challenge wide receivers and force their quarterback to hold the ball for another second or 2 longer than he wants to, then it's hard for a defensive line to get the pressure on the quarterback that they want to. I thought in that third quarter, there were times where Baker Mayfield didn't have anywhere to go with the football, and the result was some sacks and some hits on the quarterback. But we've seen at times this year where whether it's the play calls or just the technique being played within the play calls, where we're not necessarily up challenging wide receivers, forcing that quarterback to hold on to the football just a little while longer and allow those guys to be able to get to him.
And part of that too was, you talked about Baker Mayfield being at a different level in the offense. Back in week 3, a lot of that stuff was short, quick game, get the ball out fast. Now, over the course of the season, I mean, he was throwing deep balls at one of the 3rd or 4th highest rates in the NFL this season. And so everything was a little bit more downfield. And we saw that over the course of this game. How many deep balls did we see to Mike Evans, to David Moore, right? Some of those deep balls, Cade Otton down the seam. So we saw some vertical shot plays, and the Eagles were able to make them pay in some of these instances where, he's got to hold on to the football a little bit longer while the D-line was able to get home. Certainly some of the highlights from the defense in this game.
Yeah, those were some of the highlights for sure. And like you said, making Baker go through those progressions, that's what we saw in week 3, where he had to hold, he had to think a little bit longer, he had to kind of scramble in and out of the pocket and got him off his rhythm. And he's the best. He's at his best when he's in a rhythm. Couldn't really get him off a rhythm tonight.
Yeah, no, you got to give him credit. He played well tonight, and he had times there where there was nothing available to him, and he's making plays with his legs. That's not something that he does a whole lot of, but he has sort of that sneaky athleticism in there, and even with a banged-up ankle, he was still, I think I remember at least 2 times where I know he ran and picked up a first down.
On third down.
Yeah, on third down in critical situations. So, he's one of those quarterbacks that not necessarily is looking to run the ball whenever he breaks the pocket, but we played a lot of man coverage tonight. We played a lot of man coverage, and when he recognized it was man coverage, basically the defenders' backs are turned to him, and so now he can find ways to find those lanes to run.
Yeah, that's the thing, is you're not accounting for him to try and scramble. You're not spying Baker Mayfield in those instances. So when you do play man coverage and you've got all your eyes on your receivers, especially if you are sending a blitz, and we'll look at what the blitz numbers were from the Eagles in this game, but you are prone to getting beat by the scramble, and they did a couple of times tonight.
We talked a little bit about some of the younger guys just a few moments ago. Who stood out to you this season as a whole as someone you find really promising going down the stretch?
Well, we got several guys. We talk about the big guys up front, Jalen and Jordan Davis, the 2 Georgia boys there. And, I think watching Keely Ringo late in the season for the first time, I was impressed with him and his confidence that he showed in some of these games coming down the stretch. So I think his future is bright. It's so disheartening that Sidney tore his ACL last week, because I love him as a player. I'd rather have to coach a player to dial it down a little bit versus having to coach one to turn it up a little bit. And, Sidney's one of those guys. He's always 100 miles.
11. Yeah.
He's 100 miles per hour all the time. So I think the future is bright with him as well. And then we got some young corners who I want to see some more out of. Eli Ricks, and you got Josh Jobe over there. So those guys, I think, will be able to show what they can do in the future, to add to this team. Got to see Nolan Smith tonight. I think he got a hit on the quarterback, I believe.
His first half sack.
Right, so he got a sack in the game, and wanted to see a little bit more out of him this season, but he may just be one of those guys that once he gets to his second season, that's when we start to see the real Nolan Smith. I think, he put a little weight on his body, and so he can hold up down there in the trenches and possibly play on first and second down as opposed to just being sort of a pass rush specialist. I think he's going to be able to add some athleticism and some versatility to the group as well. So, I think they've done some nice things on that side of the ball where they've added some young players, and now you just have to go out, add some more complementary pieces, and we get some guys that want to fly around to the football and want to make some plays.
Yeah, for me, going to the other side, I thought we saw some really good things from Cam Jurgens this season, both in the run game and in pass protection. He got beat for a sack tonight, and he had that penalty, which questionable. We'll say a questionable penalty and a pivotal penalty because remember, that was an offsetting penalty with Levante David getting that personal foul. You mentioned at the time that was like a 27-yard swing just on that penalty. So obviously a crucial one there for the Eagles. But I think when you look at Cam Jurgens, his athleticism and his toughness, his violence, his competitiveness really showed up a number of times this season. Did a nice job at right guard, obviously banged up a couple times this season. But I think when you look at Cam, his future at center at some point down the road, I think this is a guy that you'll be able to count on here for the Eagles offensive line.
I think it's going to be interesting to watch these young players, especially the rookies this season, as they go into next season, because they got drafted into a team that appeared in the Super Bowl, and they probably had all these expectations or connotations of what that meant for this season and going forward. And I think it's an important lesson they learn in their first year in the NFL, that you just don't go back to a Super Bowl. How you might repeat in a college championship or in a bowl game in the college game. That it's really tough, and you have to learn through a lot of adversity during the way. And I think this maybe silver linings of it all could be good base foundation for them to build their NFL careers off of, having such a disappointing end to their start of the rookie season.
Yeah, and those guys aren't used to losing games. They come from programs that don't lose very many games, if at all any, throughout the course of the year. And you're talking about Georgia, Alabama. We mentioned some first-year players, but we got some second and third-year guys that are still very young as well that are going to be exciting.
Yep.
Watching them. Landon Dickerson making his second Pro Bowl, right, in 2 years. You look at Devontae Smith. I'm more and more impressed with Devontae Smith every year, how he matures. Not only as a person off the field leader, he wears the C on his chest now, but you watch him develop as a wide receiver, and there's little nuances to the game and to that position that seemingly you could tell he works very hard at, and he incorporates them into his game. Knowing that he was going to be the focal point tonight, it was going to see a lot of coverage, and whenever Tampa had to throw at him, and for him to still have the type of game he had tonight, it shows you why we are excited about having two number one caliber wide receivers in A.J. Brown, who isn't old by himself, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. I like watching Devontae Smith play, and I think his toughness is something that can be infectious for an offensive side of the football.
I think Devontae's talent level kind of gets lost in the shuffle because of A.J. Brown being as talented as he is. But Devontae Smith is a very, very capable player in terms of getting 100 catches and 1,000 yards basically any season. He is that kind of a player. And when you look at his ability just in this game to be a three-level threat, hey, you know what? Quick game, you can separate. You have that quickness to be able to get away from the defender over top of you, but then also pull away in open space, that long catch and run. You've got that ability to cut off an intermediate route, 12 yards, 15 yards, create separation, make a play, take a hit at the catch point, and then have that speed and the ball skills to make a play over the top on the deep post. 55 yards, longest play of the day for the Eagles. So the ability to make plays at all three levels of the field, line up inside, line up outside. He's as tough as they come. He catches pretty much everything thrown his way. He's the best route runner on the team. I love watching Devontae Smith play, so we got to see him on full display here in this game against the Bucs.
Yeah, and you almost forget how young he is because it gets lost in the shuffle, and because he almost plays a little bit mature beyond his years because of the way he was so seamlessly able to grow in his game, be coachable, and be a threat so early on that you forget that he is a young player when you talk about this team going forward, that he's a young option for them.
Yeah, he's going to be a star around here for a long time. So, Heisman Trophy winner, top 10 draft pick. Yeah, we got a good one.
Yeah, and speaking of young stars for this team, Jalen Hurts is at the podium right now.
Big questions for Jalen.
Jalen, how do you kind of explain the way this season ended? 6 losses in 7 games and everything just kind of looked wrong. How do you put your finger on it?
Yeah, I don't think, I think for us this year, I just don't think we've played well enough. And the identity, the consistency, the execution for us, the turnovers, everything, all of those come into play when you're talking about having an opportunity to win championships. And, it's something we have to be able to learn from, something we have to be able to learn from.
There was an ESPN report that you weren't happy with the identity of the offense over the last few months of the season. Can you confirm that and give a little more explanation as to why that is?
I think just where we are as a team. We've had a ton of opportunities to do great things, and we haven't taken advantage of them. And I've talked about the ownership of that, and me taking ownership for the things that I can control, and challenging everyone to take ownership for the things that they can't control. And for us to put the output that we want on the field, obviously have the results that we want, and have the opportunities we want,
it takes consistency in that. There's no point to identity, no more than execution. The reality is we have to be better, and that starts with me. And so,
On the safety, what happened on that play?
Got held up in the pocket. Was trying to make a play outside the pocket and make a throw down the field and move the chains. And ended up getting it up late. Guess I didn't pass the line of scrimmage, so it's a safety. I have to watch the film to see what actually happened.
Did the finger impact your performance?
I told you guys it was something coming into it. There's no excuse for the inability to do, not to do what we wanted to do out there on the field and the consistency we wanted. So was it an issue? Yeah, I said that long ago. But obviously it's just about the results, and we didn't get the results we want. But when you look at the result and say, what it is, it's about really the process and what you go about it. And so, that's just a huge self-reflection in that for everyone, and it's a huge self-reflection in that for everyone.
Offense, a lot of players. You've been through a lot of different things, career, college, pros. How would you describe what you went through this year, personally and as a team?
It's definitely been a journey, and every year has presented different joys and different challenges, and I feel like I've been able to use those things to betterment myself and better the people around me. And so, there's been a lot of ups, there's been a lot of downs, there's been a lot of challenges, there's been a lot of joys. This year, there's been a lot of great moments, and all of those moments, just using them to better yourself as an individual first and foremost, and then how can you help your team? How can you help the man next to you? And so, as things change and as things evolve, it's about, the thing that you can control and invest in yourself into the team and doing what you, need to do to help the team. And so I'm very appreciative of this group. I'm very appreciative of everything that we've been through and fought through, the games that we came back from. Obviously we took a turn there this year and, things didn't end the way we wanted. But it's simply not our turn. It's not our turn. We got a taste of it last year, winning the conference championship and having an opportunity to play in the Super Bowl, and it wasn't our turn then, right? And we had this year go the way it went this year. Talked about the standard a lot, talked about doing those things, but the standard changes from year to year because it's a whole different team. And that's one thing that I've learned, and that's one thing that I will continue to mature on and continue to learn. You learn different things, but I think that's the reality of it, and I think different years require different versions of a person, and I'll just continue to learn to be the best leader I can be for this team and for this organization. But a ton to learn from, and that's challenging the old heads to the young guys and the guys that'll come at some point here. Learn from it, and then reach one, teach one, and have an opportunity to do it again. Have an opportunity to do it again. I told those guys in there, as crazy as it is, you have to be able to use it for your advantage and find a positive out of this negative, turn that negative into a positive somehow. And, for whatever reason, the last time we were here, the very next opportunity, the very next year we had a pretty dang good year, and a successful year. Didn't finish the way we wanted, but just got to learn from it all.
But you had a lot of awesome players in the locker room and after the game. Jason Kelsey got a little emotional. What would it mean to have him back next year, and what has he meant?
Yeah, man, he's a legend in the city. He is really in the league. I don't want to do a disservice to him and the things that he's been able to do and overcome. His journey to where he is now didn't come easy. It's been a long,
long time coming for him, and every year since I've been here, it's been we want to come back, you know. But he knows how much I love and appreciate him. He knows how much I've learned from him, and you know, he'll forever have a special place in my heart.
A lot of offensive players have talked about the small things offensively that y'all tried to fix throughout the year. Devontae was talking about how that first 32, him and Dallas misread signals. They saw one thing, didn't see the second. Through the things that y'all worked out through this year, what things can you point to you can fix those small things in an off season that a regular season couldn't have done?
Yeah, just take time on task. Time on task. You know, in this league, you have to be able to find ways to win in a ton of different ways. And I feel like for a time there, we were doing that, and we were doing it at a high level. We were winning a lot of games, and we weren't playing to the level we thought we should be playing to. And then kind of got in a hole in the back end and really couldn't pick ourselves out of it. So I think a time of self-reflection in the offseason for sure, diving deep into that with the guys and just reassessing everything and growing from it. Like I said, the number one thing, my number one message is just to use every moment as an opportunity to learn and grow. And, you know, it may not show now, but it'll show, you know. And as I said, it wasn't our turn. It's not our turn. We've had the opportunities. We've had the crumbs. We've had everything to our disposal. But it wasn't our turn. And I can accept that. And I think we can accept that, knowing that the sun will rise tomorrow and there'll be another opportunity to attack it. You know, it's going to be tough watching, and not you know, this is just all over, but we'll learn from it. I know I'll learn from it, and I'll give it my all and do my best in all of that.
Do you want Nick back? Do you want Nick back?
I didn't know he was going anywhere.
Well, obviously a lot of question about whether.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that.
Nah.
Where's your confidence level in him then to fix this team?
I have everybody. I have a ton of confidence in everyone in this building. It's just a matter of us going out there and playing clean football. And that's been something that we have not done, you know. And so.
Devontae said that one of the reasons you couldn't run the ball as much as you wanted to is because they kept sending blitzes. You can't run against a blitz, and it was there to be beaten. It was just, you know, a missed play here, a missed assignment there. You, as a team, and you personally have struggled against the blitz a lot in the last few weeks. How does that get fixed? How do you make them pay?
You say execution. You know, knowing your assignment and doing your assignment. I think a couple times it just got us, you know, and it's something that we all have to learn from and move forward from and be better at that, you know.
Jalen Hurts, they're wrapping up this season for the Philadelphia Eagles, and something he said that kind of stuck out to me was, it's not our turn this year. And I think that was kind of a feeling that was felt throughout the team, and just having to put that in perspective and move forward the best they can.
Yeah, it's one of the most difficult things to come to grips with, right? Because you put all that work in the offseason because you believe that's what it takes for you to get to that championship. And to a man, most guys are going to think they did put enough work in the offseason to get back to that title. And you know, for this team, I think a lot of players did come back with the right mindset. They got off to a great start record-wise. And even though those games may not have been as pleasing to watch for some, I think winning 10 games out of 11 games is very hard to do in this league. And that's something you can certainly hang your hat on. I think for this team, when they reflect back on the season, they have to me, reflect back on how did we get down the path that we ended up on, but B, why couldn't we get off that path? And I think that's more of the question, where if you're a player, especially in Jalen's position, he's probably trying to figure out, man, why couldn't I play well enough to get us out of this funk? It's not as if he's not trying to do it. And sometimes you may be trying too hard. Like sometimes you want it so desperately and you want it so bad that you're trying a little bit too hard as opposed to letting things come to you naturally. So no one on the team outside of the head coach, but I mean from a player standpoint, takes these type of endings to the season and these type of defeats harder than the quarterback does. It just does. You know, when you're sitting in that position that he's sitting in and wearing that C on his chest as proudly as he wears it, as one of the captains of his team, and being in that position, you know, he realizes that a lot of this sort of starts with him. You know, whether it's fair or unfair, he knows that, and he's the one, because I love the quote, he's the one who sets the temperature in the room. He's the thermostat. And, you know, usually when he's playing well, the team usually follows suit. So he's going to take what happened to end this season, how this season ended, harder than any player, because that's just what comes with being the quarterback. And you sit there and you listen to him, you can almost hear it in some of his answers that he can't wait to get this taste out of his mouth as far as this disappointment and everybody sort of questioning who you are as an individual, who you are as a team. And when you're talking about wearing the team, the shield, the badge with honor and pride, you know, the quarterback usually is the one is the biggest representative of that. And so, you know, I can almost feel for him being up there because, like I said, a lot of this, you know, fairly or unfairly falls at his feet.
And listening to him speak, listening to the rest of the players that we've heard from tonight, you know, Dallas Goedert, we heard from Lane Johnson, seeing quotes online from, you know, Brandon Graham and from other players on the team. And not everybody spoke tonight. My guess is a lot of those guys, you're going to let that marinate for tonight. And some of them, you know, when they speak to the media tomorrow, maybe there's a little bit more in terms of like letting that kind of unfold from not just tonight, but from the entire season. And some of it might not be until they come back for OTAs or when they go on a teammates podcast or when they do media at Super Bowl Radio Row, right? When you start to get some of those media appearances over the next several months, we'll start to get us more insight in terms of the thought process of this team, but obviously a lot to talk about and a lot to collect internally from this last month and change.
One of the bright moments of tonight's game, however, was a huge pass down the middle of the field between Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith, and that is the subject of this week's Ricoh Review.
All right, let's go back to the offensive spark in the first half this week on the Ricoh Review as we look at a 35-yard catch and run from wide receiver Devontae Smith that happened on a simple slant route. Let's go into what made this play work, because the Eagles are running a simple RPO here where you have the entire offensive line working to the right. It's going to be outside zone. The Eagles really like to use some outside perimeter runs against this defense, really to keep the ball away from those nose tackles inside, namely Vita Vea. You want to get those guys working sideline to sideline, not running necessarily right into the teeth of the rush with the inside zone. So you're going to see here that it is outside zone. So you get the running back and the offensive line all on a perimeter outside track. And we'll let this run for a second. You can see what we're looking at here as Jalen Hurts takes the snap. And he's going to just read this backside linebacker here. And if he gets a little too aggressive here, well, he's going to have Devontae Smith working on a slant route on the backside. Now, this actually works doubly in the Eagles' favor as well because the Bucs are going to blitz the slot corner from that side. So with Christian Izien coming off the slot here, that really creates a giant void in the coverage, and it leads Devontae one-on-one with the safety because the linebacker, he's got eyes on the run game, the nickel corner, he's blitzing off the edge. So now you've got that one-on-one matchup on the outside. We can let this run, and now Jalen's just going to let Devontae cook. He beats the safety in space. He catches this up midfield, and he puts this into plus territory. This catch and run leads the Eagles to their first points of the night and really got things going for Devontae Smith. Over 100 yards in the first half for the third-year wide receiver.
Over the course of the 2023 season, you've selected the Toyota Player of the Week after every game. Now we want to know who is your Toyota Player of the Year. Visit PhiladelphiaEagles.com/Player of the Year and vote for which Eagles player you think has been bringing it all season long. Everyone who participates will be entered for a chance to win the grand prize, a brand new Toyota. The nominees are A.J. Brown, Landon Dickerson, Jake Elliott, Jalen Hurts, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelce, Hassan Reddick, and DeAndre Swift. Do either of you want to weigh in?
Was that 3 old linemen in there?
Yeah.
My goodness.
Bunch of Pro Bowlers.
Yeah, those are your Pro Bowlers.
Tough choice there for the Player of the Year, though.
Yeah, I would go with A.J. Brown.
A.J. Brown?
Yeah, I think I might go AJ.
Yeah,
I think I might go AJ.
Well, just like that, the season is over for the Philadelphia Eagles. It was an ending not many of us expected when this season started, given that they were off to a hot start this year. But we want to thank all of you at home for joining us through the good, the bad, and sticking with us throughout the entire show. So for Fran and Ike, our entire crew, our producer Melissa, we thank you so much for joining us this season, and we'll see you next year.